What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of the Sheehan Show here on Sherdog.com. My name is Sean Sheehan and I am back with another preview, and this time we are looking ahead to KSW 84, which goes down obviously over in Poland this weekend, July 15th, and the heavyweight title is on the line. And I think it's a very interesting time, look, for KSW, but for the heavyweight division, I suppose, worldwide as well. You know, I talked about on my One Championship preview, which will be out before this more than likely, but around the same time as well. Only a couple of weeks ago, the One Championship heavyweight belt was on the line. Look at all the stuff that's going on, I suppose, with Francis Ngannou. Look at, John Jones versus Stipe. Ryan Bader, he hasn't fought in a while, but, I'm sure Bader will be back in Bellator and, heavyweights elsewhere as well. It's a funny time, I suppose, for a heavyweight division, because you could argue, is Francis the best in the world? Is John Jones the best in the world? Or, maybe there's someone else out there you think of might be the best in the world, whether it's, Bruno Capiloza. Now, the PFL heavyweight tournament is going on as well. And probably the two best heavyweights in the PFL, apart from Ngannou, are probably out of that. So, and the point in that is, the heavyweight division is very fractured. And I actually think there's probably 5 heavyweights at least outside of the UFC who, if they came to the UFC, they'd be in the UFC top 15, I think. Now, is there any other weight division like that? Like, there's some good, lightweights out there, and, Usman Nurmagomedov is out there, Patricio Pitbull is out there, AJ McKee is out there, obviously in different weight classes. Sergio Pettis would be ranked. Roberto Soldic obviously had a bad result the last time, but Anatoly, whose name is Malyakin, whose name I can never remember his second name. But Philip de Vries is one of those as well. And, Khalidov, and, there's been many in KSW over the last while. But I'm just interested, because I want to talk about Philip de Vries here in a second. I want to talk about KSW for a second first as well. But just on that heavyweight division, it's been a division which I suppose we have been used to having fractures in throughout, MMA. I suppose you call it the whole history nearly, from Fedor coming the whole way through to all the great Pride heavyweights with Krokop and stuff who obviously ended up coming over. But then even to more recent times, Overeem was a long time outside of the UFC in Strikeforce and all, and he eventually obviously came to the UFC then. And so, and Arlovsky was out there, Josh Barnett, and, a lot of them obviously, as I said, did end up being in the UFC first or coming back or just coming to the UFC later in their career. But there has been a fractured nature. And I honestly think it's weirdly more fractured now probably than it's ever been. And I do think that leads to people like Philip de Vries, and I will get into more to de Vries in a second, but being able to strike a really good career for themselves outside of the UFC, because just like the UFC, the heavyweights sell and people love the heavyweights. And look, if we're talking about a Polish promotion, we know what the Poles like. Like, they like their big heavyweights, they love their Pudzianowski and their big lads, big medium intro and meat, they love that. So Philip de Vries has been an absolute revelation over there, and we will, as I said, talk more about him in a second. Just on KSW as well, I feel the need to say it almost every time I do a KSW preview, but the last card, the big Coliseum card, was not only brilliant on paper, and as we talk about the 60,000 fans or whatever, 40,000 fans I think in attendance, it also turned out to be a really good card. Now the co-main event fell out, and we all know about that, but sure, look, that happens on all MMA cards. But the madness that ensued on that night is just brilliant. And I feel like sometimes when you see it and experience it live, like I've seen, obviously KSW came to Dublin here once and I was at it, but also seeing the Cage Warriors cards, or even the UFC Dublin or the Bellator Dublin, there's some of these cards that you need to just you need to experience them, you need to watch them. And not even if it's you're sitting at home watching it, if there's a KSW card in the Coliseum, Khalidov is fighting, some of their big fighters, you need to be watching that. If there is, a Bellator Dublin on, or a UFC Dublin or whatever it might be, or a Cage Warriors Dublin, you need to be watching that. And I'm sure if there's a big Volkanovski fight in Australia or whatever it might be, but KSW is one of them. You know, it's must-see TV, and the production value that, honestly, I think their production value is the best in any MMA organization. I love the way and it's, you know, it's a little bit funny, it's a little bit, you know, not our normal, I suppose, Eastern, in terms of the English-speaking world anyway, normal MMA production. It's a little bit different, and I think as someone like, and I wasn't around necessarily in the main Pride days, maybe catching the end of it or whatever, but like watching Fedor fights, let's say in Russia, even in the kind of, you know, that middle bit of Fedor's career there, or, you know, there's always the odd fighter that fights somewhere years ago, and like watching in, you know, getting that dodgy stream or whatever it might be, it was brilliant. Even when I was young, like watching Ricky Hatton in the middle of the night or something like that, and, you know, an experience combat sports watching is always fun, I think, and I think that's what KSW is, and that's why they stick out as one of the best promotions in the world, to be honest, and that's why I try to do as many of their cards as I possibly can here in my preview shows, because they're absolutely brilliant. Like, I honestly, like, sometimes I'm very down on the UFC because I don't know, it's just so homogenized, I think, but like, there's nothing homogenized about KSW. But then when you watch the other promotions, well, and I bang on about it here all the time, but I think it's right to do it. There's just something a little bit different about him. But anyway, let's get into this card and let's talk about it. Shout out as always to my guy Sean Dinny. He's a Polish MMA expert, and he always gives me a hand, throws me over some of his cliff notes for these cards, because, you know, it's a different world. And the thing about it is as well, right, there is a world here by itself. Like, it's funny, there's MMA worlds all over the place, like even in small places and small countries even. There's like these little MMA bubbles kind of create themselves. And it's funny, I know the KSW one isn't little by any means, don't get me wrong there. But they have created like divisions, obviously, but like people coming through and people with storylines and people with 20, 30, 40 fights that maybe you don't get in other places because they want to kind of move on, whereas people are happy to stay in KSW and put great careers on for themselves. And that brings me to Philip De Vries, because he is a guy who has absolutely done that. He's on an almighty run at the moment, 9 title defenses. Sean Denny was telling me about he's getting a Rolex for his 5-year anniversary in KSW, and like that run has just been absolutely fantastic. Like, obviously was in the UFC. When was his last fight? In 2013. I'm just looking here. He'd one fight in Bellator as well, and then it was 2018. It feels like it's longer, you know. It's only been 5 years, but what a run of 5 years he's been in there. Like, he was on that big. You know, I'm looking at the Duplessis last weekend. It was Stosic versus Duplessis. Was KSW 43. That was his first fight in there, and like, he's fought the likes of Luis Enrique, Dario Stosic, who we'll be talking about later on. You know, Todd Duffy last time out, Thomas Narcoon, Carl Bedorf, Ricardo Prazel, who used to play for Chelsea, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. It's been an unbelievable run, like finishing most of those lads as well. Like, his last 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in a row, all by finish. You know, one of them in the 5th round, but you know, most of the other ones in the first, all the other ones in the first couple of rounds. In fact, so I think it's like, I talk about it with PFL sometimes, and you look at it with, say, like a guy like Brendan Loughnane, or you look at a guy, say, like Brian Bader in Bellator. You can have a great career and earn a lot of money and do a lot of things outside of the UFC, and it's great that we have places like that. And KSW, like, has there been a better place to do that than KSW in the last, let's say, 10 years? I actually don't think there has. Like, you look like a guy like Khalidov, like, and fair enough, you want to say maybe Bellator, you want to say PFL. PFL hasn't been around that long, first of all, so KSW have to step up at them over that. PFL are doing good things. You know, Bellator are kind of in and out, and I think a lot of, you know, the top guys in Bellator ended up leaving and going to the UFC eventually. But KSW, a lot of the guys end up staying, like, you know, and even when they do go, like Stosic, you went over to one championship. So you have the ability to get yourself a great career over there, and that's exactly what Philip De Vries has done. Like, and if you look at him now, right, he's 37 years of age. He's probably coming to the last few years, although the way he's fighting, maybe he isn't, but the amount of money he's able to earn over there, I'm sure if Philip De Vries wanted, and let's say his contract was up or whatever, like, Well, the UFC would have to take him back at this stage. Like, he's been fighting so well. He's on such a good run and beating good lads on the way of doing it. He'd have no problem doing that. But I think he seems to be happy enough out there and has put a great career for himself out there. And like, we need to appreciate as well, appreciate what he did. No matter what happens this weekend, what a run he's been on. Like, to win 9 heavyweight or have 9 heavyweight title defenses in a row is absolutely insane. And like, what is it? Let me just count them up here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 fights in a row of a win streak at heavyweight. Absolutely insane. Absolutely insane. And what a way, what a fighter for KSW to have, but what a fight promotion for him to get with. Absolutely brilliant. Like, he's training out with Tom Aspinall as well, Paul Craig, Mick Parkin, who's obviously in the UFC now, coming through the Contender Series as well. But like, looking back at some of Philip de Vries's fights, obviously, look, the first thing to say, an unbelievable grappler. The submission record is insane. 13 submissions now in his career, in 23 fights in terms of 23 wins. And I think it's the old school type of submission, the key locks. And I see he had a bulldog choke there recently as well. And, I think he's changed kind of more to that than a lot of the old ones, rear naked chokes, taking the back and stuff like that. But more recently in his career, I think, look, people, you're going to be preparing for Phil de Vries. It works for him well because they're like not wanting to give up a submission, and then they end up getting ground and pounded, and watching, a few of his recent fights, as I said, multiple times that happens. It's just like a guy, right, I'm going to give up my back here, but I don't want to get choked. I'm going to give up the mount, I get ground and pounded, or like, I'm going to leave you in side control. Like, I'm not going to give up an arm or anything like that. I'm going to try to make my way out. And then he catches him with one big shot, and it's big problems for them. So once Phil de Vries gets you to the ground, you're in bad trouble. You're in bad trouble there. But on the feet, I think what he has kind of designed for himself is a very functional striking skill set, where he where he's happy to kind of keep it at length, wait for you to kind of make that mistake or whatever it might be, come in, and then he will take the opportunity, throw a double leg, push you against the cage. Do you know what he reminds me of as well? And maybe this is a little bit of a stretch, but like, he's a good athlete, but doesn't look like one. And the comparison I'd make is Tyson Fury. Now, I'm not saying like an ability or standing in the heavyweight division in our sport compared to that, but his ability to move kind of and function in different ways is unusual for a guy of his build, and we don't see that very often in sport. Well, maybe they see it more in American sports. We don't see that very often in MMA or maybe other sports that I be watching, to use the Mochanil up there. But I think Philip de Vries is like that. And his opponent, Sion Bajor, he's a guy with a lot of fights as well. In fact, he's more fights than Phil. And he's a guy who can fight all around. 24 wins, 10 wins by submission, 10 wins by a knockout. And he's on a great run as well, 4 wins in a row. He was actually over in the PFL that I mentioned earlier on. He fought Honey Marks and ended up beating him. But like, he's been fighting in FEN before that. He fought the likes of Ali Thompson a few years ago. Fought Valentina Moldavsky. Actually, I watched that fight. He ended up losing that fight, but it was weird kind of, it was a 2-round risen fight, and I could have gone on a little bit longer. It was one of those ones, and he's fought some of the best guys in the world, like Denis Goltsov as well. He ended up losing to him also, but like, to be in there with him, been in there with Marcin Tybura as well. So yeah, like, for a long time, fighting since 2010, he's really been in there with some of the best people coming through in the world. And like, as I said, he's lost a lot of them, but beating Honey Marks last time out is maybe that big win that he needed, and has won 7 of his last 8. It's an unbelievable run for him. Watching his fights, you look at that record of, what was it? Let me just see it here again. 24 wins, 20 stoppages. 24 wins, 20 stoppages. watching these fights, like it's almost amazing he gets that many stoppages, I think, because he is, for a heavyweight, and he's 35 years old now as well, fighting kind of out of the southpaw a lot. He is a guy who kind of waits on his opponents and then just... It's not a big heavyweight counter that comes. It's mostly like the running on a kind of catch you counter, or more of the time actually rather than countering. He's kind of pushing forward, pushing the pace and kind of winning the fight in the area. He wins it. But once he gets the fight to the ground, he looks different. You know, as I talked about looking athletic, I don't think he looks like the most athletic guy in the world either, but he is very athletic when he gets to the ground and is very good ground and pound. So I think, like a lot of those TKO, KOs in his record there, the 10 of them, I would very highly consider some of them ground and pound knockouts, I would say, because of the way he fights. But, you know, he has some elbows I see in there, and that ground and pound is absolutely nasty when he gets you to the ground. I just wonder, like, in a fight where both guys would probably want to be on the ground, could it turn into a bit of a striking matchup, and who'll win that there? I think Szymon has a great chance there, actually, because like I do think his striking is good, not massively effective. Like, look, they're two heavyweights; they can both hit hard. If one of them catches the other one, they'll probably get knocked out. Let's be real here. But I think it's a tough enough fight for Phil to freeze. Now, if Phil gets the takedown, the fight changes massively. If Szymon gets a takedown, the fight changes massively as well, although Philip is very good at getting up off the ground himself as well, to which I'm sure Szymon will be as well. But I think it's an interesting fight. Like, when you have a great grappler like Philip de Vries, if you put him in there with another great grappler, it gives him the, a tough matchup that he doesn't often get. So it's, it's one, if you're wanting to look for my pick, I'm going to pick Philip de Vries, but I think it's an interesting one. I definitely do think it is a very, very interesting one there. Right, let's move on. And we'll talk about a few of the other fights there. I'll pick out one or two and then I'll kind of run through the notes for the rest of them. In the co-main event, look, Sebastian Przybysz is back here at the bantamweight division. Former bantamweight champion. He's fighting Islam Djabrailov. I watched a bit of Islam, and he's a 9-4 record, or 8-4 record even, actually, here up in Czertok. And he's fighting Przybysz, who has 14 fights now and has fought at as I said, as a champion, and fought at a very good level, and fought, the likes of Jacko Wiślak, the likes of Anton Rakic a couple of times, and Islam has not been in with that sort of a name, and looking at him, do you know what, he doesn't look like he moves in the same fashion of championship fighter in KSW would, if you want to put it that way. Now, again, I'll say this, when he gets to the ground offensively, he looks very good. He looks really, really, really good, but he has been submitted 3 times in his career. Out of his 4 losses, 3 of them are by submission. He's 3 wins by submission as well. But that would suggest against a guy like Przybysz, who has a few submission wins as well. He is obviously a very good striker, and he will, I think he will strike first with him, and he won't be afraid. He will definitely strike with him, I think, because Islam is not the best striker in the world, but I think most guys, he will try to take him down. I think the power of Przybysz, the class of Przybysz on the feet, will just be too much. I just, as I said, you watch a good few of this whole card, and you see the class, or you're watching a UFC card, you're watching a PFL card coming up, and you see the level of MMA these days and the level you need. And I just don't think Islam's striking is that level. Whereas Sebastian Przybysz is, 8-2 in KSW. He's an elite guy at 135 pounds, and maybe Islam has improved an awful lot. He hasn't fought in over or close to a year now at this stage. But from the evidence I saw, and this is just me now, when I watch these fights, I don't think he'd be at that level. So I think Sebastian Przybysz will win that one. The next fight I want to talk about is Darko Stosic, who's fighting at heavyweight against Stefan Vojcak. And obviously with the heavyweight title up for grabs in the main event, this is an interesting fight, because could we see, the next contender or whatever it might be? Who knows here? Like Stosic, and I know I think there's an interview going up on KSW with Stosic as well. So if that's not already up, wait for it to come up, or it is up. Please check it out. He has obviously lost to Philip de Vries back in 2022. Now, 1-1 since then. Did go over to Brave and fought Shamil Gaziev. Did beat Michael Kita, who he's beaten a couple of times before. But he was in the UFC. He had that run where he lost to obviously the champion in light heavyweight now, Jamal Hill, and Kennedy and Chukwu and things like that. But he is a guy who hits hard. He's a pure finisher. 11 knockouts in his career, and his opponent has never faced anything like that. He's only 6-0. This is his KSW debut. He fought in Octagon. He fought in UAE Warriors. He beats Sofian Bakaju, who's been around a good time, but I don't think Bakaju is the same fighter he once was. He's a good guy to go in and test people. He fought Rug and he fought Tom Aspen and things like that. But he lost to Stuart Austin in PFL there last year. I don't think Stuart Austin is the best fighter in the world, if I'm being honest. And if you're losing to him, I don't think you're going to be beating Dario Stosic. Now, Stosic is 31 years of age. It is a big fight for him, I suppose, coming back to KSW. He's putting it back, I suppose, all on the line here for this one. But everything with him, big power, big punches, big takedowns, big slams, loves to just come in and throw that big shot. Just throw that big shot. And will Vojcak be able to live with that? It's hard to see it now. Watching some of his fights, he looks a guy who is very good, but not fighting the level of guys you would expect. So it's a big step up. Like last week in the UFC, Valentin Woodburn, I watched all of his fights and this guy looked good, and he definitely has talent. But then you come in against Bo Nickel and it's it's all well and good having talent against regional guys who are not that good, but you come in against a guy like Darko Stosic and it's going to be very, very tough on you. Very, very tough on you. So I think Stosic will win that one. But I think Stefan Southpaw as well, he could cause problems. Now, it's weird. It feels like I'm kind of talking him out of this a little bit, but I think if he can rise to the level and he has the ability, this could be a breakout fight for him. But it's just does he have it? Does he have that ability? And I suppose we'll wait and see on that one. Right, let's move on and talk about the next fight, and it's Damian Janikowski is back again. He's fighting the well able to pronounce Teshar Kinshik, who is 13 and 33 years of age. And, he's fought some of the best guys in KSW over the last while, and now he's had a lot of losses, I suppose. Lost to Tommy Ramanovsky, lost to Pavel Pavlak, and lost to Abus Magomedov, who we saw not too long ago in the UFC in the main event. And, going in against Janikowski, lost to Tom Breeze there last year, but did come back with a win. He was fighting over in a different promotion than KSW. As we know about Janikowski, bronze medalist in the Greco-Roman in the 2012 Olympics, but his striking has improved. Suplex, I mentioned in the last one as well that I did, talking about him, and he will throw you around if he needs to be. But Kinshik, his nickname is the Polish Tank, and he's a soldier as a day job. Big knockout power, and he has unbelievable cardio. I was talking to Sean about it, and he was saying this guy, his power lasts the whole fight. And I went and watched a couple of these fights, and I'm like, by God, it does. And it's funny, he's called a tank. He fights like a tank. He just plows forward and runs you over. As I said, he's come up against some very, very good guys recently, and that's always going to be an issue. But I just wonder if Janikowski, will do the same thing to him, because like he has always had the ability, has Janikowski, and he's beaten some very good guys, but again, he has lost to Breeze, to Pavlak, to Koleschki, to Ilic, and I believe he's won as a win over Ilic as well. Lost to Michel Materla, and not to say he doesn't have good wins, the likes of Yannick Bahati and others as well, but I think it's time now. It's time for Damian Janikowski, and I think he will find out a great team, the WCA fight team. Obviously, he needs to get on the winning track now, and it's a big opportunity for him here. I'd love to see the betting odds, because I think Kesik will be the underdog here, and do you know what? I think I might be going for him in this one. So those are kind of the big man fights. I'll run through some of the other fights coming up here. Bartosz Lesko against Nemanja Nikolic. Lesko fighting out of his hometown here in this one in the middleweight division. Loves a submission. Has half his wins so far in his career are by submission, and I think, or all of them, I think, are by via rear naked choke. Nikolic on the other side, then he is from Serbia, well rounded, 8 finishes evenly spread between knockouts and submissions. Again, the strength of his opponents, not the best in the world, undefeated, 9-0-1, a finisher, loves to start quick. Only one of his fights is 10-0. In fact, only one of his fights is 10-0-1, and only one of his fights, apart from the draw, has gone to a decision. So yeah, it'd be very interesting. Look to me, watching him, looks a good athlete, and a guy who you I suppose definitely need to keep an eye on here. After that, then Bruno Santos versus Gustavo Oliveira. Santos, former challenger at 135 pounds. 10-4 versus 9-2. Bruno, very good BJJ. Obviously, you look at his record again, half his wins by a submission. Gustavo is a finisher. 8 out of his 9 wins have been finished, but he's only fought once, I believe, in KSW before, ended up losing that to Patryk Sordin. So it's a big opportunity for him coming back in here now. Bruno lost 3 of his last 4, lost to Rakic, lost to Vishlak, lost to Pripshka, who we just mentioned, but beat Pavel Polito, who's a good fighter, trained over in Ireland here for a while, I believe as well. So it'll be an interesting one. His BJJ might be an issue, and I think maybe Santos will try to play on that and see if he can get through with that there. Then a featherweight fight, Damian Stasiak, who we've known as well, has been around for a good while. Ex-UFC vet, I think he's 6 fights in the UFC, 2-4. Lots of submissions in his game as well. 13 wins, 10 by submission. And it's been a mixed bag, I suppose, since he came back to KSW after that UFC run. Obviously, he had a massive win in the UFC, beating Davy Grant, who everyone knows, but then he lost to Pedro Munoz, Brian Kelleher, and lost another fight as well. Travelled around a bit, but has fought Anton Rakic, ended up losing to him, and lost his last 2 in KSW as well, although he had 2 wins before that as well. Pascal, fighting out of Germany, was in KSW for a good while, had a fight outside of KSW last time out, got knocked out in 63 seconds. So again, there's a lot of fights and a lot of jeopardy on this. A lot of lads, they could be on a run or they could be going out of there very, very quickly. And Pascal fighting out of UFD gym, who everyone I suppose knows by now, and a versatile, good, well-rounded fighter, but a big step up, I suppose, against Stasiak here. Henry Fadipe then, Ireland's own, is also on this, and this is going to be, I think, his 3rd fight over in KSW. He's a guy who has been on the radar, obviously myself covering MMA in Ireland for a long time, but he was out of the cage for ages as well, and I think a lot of people were very surprised when he came back. He didn't fight between 2017 and 2021, but he came back and won 4 in a row before that, and he ended up losing his last one, over in KSW, a decision loss there, but you know, I was talking to my colleague Graham, who obviously has been covering Irish MMA since before me, even over in the Severe MMA podcast this week, and he was saying, like, Henry has all the talent. Like, we were talking about Dylan Tuke, Franz Malambo last weekend, and they kind of came from the same era, I suppose, and lads with a lot of talent, but like maybe didn't get that break and didn't get through. And now it's good to see all of them, you know, coming back. And the two lads won at the weekend, and now Fadipe is coming back, and he's looking to do the same again. Another finisher. 12 of his 13 wins have been inside the distance, but he's taken a lot of losses as well, and he's been finished a good few times in his career. But you know, his opponent coming in here, Krystian. He's been fighting KSW now for a good long while. He made his debut to KSW over in 2018. He's been in there with Roberto Soldic. Like, so, you know, if you're going to be put in there with Roberto Soldic, you can't be a bad fighter. He's fighting out of his hometown as well. So, you know, Fadipe is going to be on the back foot here. Very strong wrestler. Fadipe is known more as a striker, so it's going to be a tough matchup here. But look, if Fadipe can keep it standing, he's every chance. I know Krystian has power on the feet as well, but you know, so Fadipe as well. I mentioned he's a finisher, like, and as I said, he's 3 submissions. He won that his last fight, or his last win by Peruvian necktie as well. So, you know, he's well able to go in there and fight with someone in the ground, although would he be as much of a favourite there? Maybe not. And the last couple of fights on the card then, a middleweight fight and a bantamweight fight. First of all, to the middleweights, we have Borys Dzikowski against Damian Mieczkowski. Borys, big tall guy, big beard, knockout artist, if you can say that for a guy with 3 fights but can wrestle as well. And Damian, he's a soldier too. Only pro MMA fight so far is a knockout. You know, an interesting fight. Obviously, there isn't too much tape on either of these two guys, so I'd say someone will be getting knocked out there. And in the first fight of the night is 2-1 versus 3-3. Melchert versus Patryk. Chrobak. Patryk on a 3-fight losing streak at the moment. 2 of those in KSW. Has some good knockouts though in his record, and you know, grappling and submissions as an amateur, as well as 1 submission win as a pro. Some people might know Melchert. He lost to Karen McNally from Ireland last August, and he's a striker as well with power, so that could be an interesting one there as well. But yeah, that is it anyway from top to bottom. Obviously, I'm very much looking forward to that main event with the heavyweight KSW title on the line. But KSW fights, events, they're always fun, and I'm looking forward to seeing it. All right, everyone, I will leave it there. Thank you very much for tuning in, listening, watching, whatever you do. If you are watching here on YouTube, please click the subscribe button. If you're listening anywhere else, please hit subscribe there as well, and you get all the other great stuff from Sherdog. My name is Sean Sheehan for Sherdog.com, and I'll see you all next time.